How we doing? So, welcome. We're gonna have some fun. Been doing some reading on some very cutting-edge research in genomics and human biology. I do a lot of research in, and have been doing a lot of research in neuroscience lately, as well as epigenetics and other things like this. That's just what I do. It's all about learning how we interact with the unity of it all. And that definitely seems to be through our brain, our heart brain, as well as basically our whole entire being. You can't separate one part of us and say, well, that's not me. You know, in an example that I've used plenty of times before, if you were to cut off your hand and have it sitting here, and then say, hey, and then say, hey, there's a hand there. It used to be my hand. It's not my hand anymore because I've got one hand less, right? So, okay, that's not your hand. So if I cut off my forearm and did that, well, it's not my forearm. If I cut off my whole entire arm and did that, it's not my arm. If I cut off both my arms and both my legs and put them there in front of me and say, well, that used to be my arms and that used to be my legs, are they still me? Well, they're not me anymore because I'm here, right? So this idea that we can cut away parts of ourselves and they're still us is a really good way to conceptualize how we can't be separated from one part to a piece, whether that's from particles or from fibers of hair to hair, or from skin cell to skin cell, or from human to human. I was almost going to say person there. Bad word, person. Don't use the word person. You have a person. You are not a person. But the point being, this document that I just found, I'll post a link for it in the chat or the description of the video when I finish. Oh, by the way, watermelon tourmaline. We've got a friend here today. Ooh, so sweet. So it's called Genetics, Genome in Dissolution. Actually, I had to get a translated copy because it was done by a German guy, originally written in German. Ulrich Bahnsen. I'm hoping I pronounced that eccentrically correctly. Okay. Ulrich Bahnsen, just for complete awareness and investigative reporting, is actually a well-known researcher, studied biology with a focus on molecular biology, and did his doctorate in the field of neurogenetics at the Hamburg University Hospital. He started working as a science journalist in 1994, was a permanent freelance writer for Spiegel and editor for the Swiss news magazine Facts. He has been an editor in the knowledge department since 2001. His books Reading Life, What the Blood Reveals About Our Future, and 2017 at Droma, The End of All Suffering. Right? So I might have got that year wrong for the book. I think that's for the Reading Life. The End of All Suffering was done in this year, in January, actually. Anthropology, biomedicine, genetics, neurogenetics, neurobiology, all these things. This guy is he's pretty cool. Hey, Jackie. So Ulrich Bahnsen is the author of this paper, and I'm just going to read you the first part of it because it's only only 9 pages, but the first part is all that we need, really. And if you're really interested, like I said, you can follow the link once I post it in the actual in the description. So he goes on to say, and he opens with, the genome was considered to be the unchangeable blueprint of the human being, which is determined at the beginning of our life. Science must bid farewell to this idea. Our genetic makeup is in a state of constant change. Let me repeat that last part. Science must bid farewell to this idea that the genome is considered to be unchangeable as a blueprint for the human being, which is determined at the beginning of our life. We have to get rid of it. It's no longer. It's just not cricket, right? But we know this now. We know this. Why? Because of so many amazing people who have all brought us this far at this point in time. I'm just bringing you the interpretation of it. 2 years ago, 25 geneticists sat down at the University of California at Berkeley to answer this seemingly simple question. What is a gene? However, the attempt to define the basic concept of their entire field precisely proved to be extremely difficult. The expert meeting almost ended in disaster, recalls Karen Ilbeck, professor of human genetics at Berkeley and host of the roundtable meeting. We had meetings for hours. Everyone was screaming at each other. Oh, this gets interesting. The academic discussion at Berkeley has little to do with research readiness. It was a first symptom that the life sciences, as yet unnoticed by the public, are on the verge of a turning point. Okay, not are at a verge of speeding up or slowing down. It's not heading in that direction anymore. Okay, so it's time to get rid of this idea. Stop thinking that your genes make who you are. Get rid of it. What researchers are bringing to light in the chromosomal strands of humans or animals goes beyond the previous thought patterns of genetics. Similar to the beginning of the 20th century, when Einstein and his comrades in arms formed a new physical worldview, the age of relativistic genetics may be dawning. Relativistic genetics is about freaking time, because we know that the entire universe that we live in is relativistic at its core, which means it changes from point to point to point to point to point relative to the circumstance at hand. And that is clearly what I've been doing in my life and in my passion. I was almost going to say work. I hate that word. It's not work. It's my life. It's my essence. It's my breath. It's what I draw charge from the universe for, is to help people solve problems and get over issues that they have. That your genes, your brain, your health, your entire body, everything that is about you, everything that is negative, everything that is a problem that you might indicate as, is relativistic, which means it can change. Nothing is rooted in your genes. That is an absolutely unscientific claim. Oh, it's in my genes. Can't do anything about it. No, not anymore. Medical research in particular is facing new challenges. The first outlines show that body and soul. This is high-level medical university sort of stuff, and we've just used the word soul. The first outlines show that body and soul, their health, disease, development, and aging are subject to a genetic interplay whose complexity exceeds all previous conceptions. Conceptions, not actualities. So the ideas that we had about genetics and how complicated it was, okay, cool, that's no issue. But before we decided that that's the way it was, and we're now realizing that that's not the case, we had all these other concepts where we're like, oh, maybe it's like this, or maybe it's like that, or maybe it's like this, or maybe it's like that. And then we went, oh, no, it's probably more like this. Well, none of this even comes close to the previous, to the current complex understanding. And this is accurate for the human brain as well. Just a small digress. Previously, we've calculated neural processing speeds and capacities at unit point measurements to say that is, if you had 100 neurons, you had 100 bits of information processing. Not too long ago, only about 12 months, 18 months ago, there was some neuroscientists who realized that a single neuron can have, who knows how many dendrites, can have all sorts of dendrites. The amount of dendrites that you have are actually maximally peaking at the age of about 3 years old. And then afterwards they go through a pruning process, they call it, where your use it or lose it attitude comes into it. So the electrical impulses move around the brain, which reinforces the anions and the what are the connections called? The synapses, which forces them to come together in more solid connections. This is how we prune what is relevant and how we shape what is pattern behavior in a human being. Because we're pattern creatures, we're not empirically logical creatures. So at the same time that we're realizing this in genetics, that the complication of your genetics is beyond our previous conceptualization. Just at the same time, we're realizing the same thing with your brain, where we previously thought that the brain could process so many bits of information per second. Yeah, I can't remember the number off the top of my head. I'm not going to waste your time Googling it. But everybody's probably heard about somebody online talking about how many bits of information you can process in a human brain, potentially in a second. Well, that's just been multiplied by itself, 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 and probably again by itself, to some exuberant amount of number that you can't even conceptualize of what we're talking about here. What I'm trying to say to you is that one single neuron has all sorts of roots coming off of it that make connection with other neurons. Every point of these roots can process and move information back and forth across the entire system of not just your brain, your whole entire body. Okay? I'm not saying that parts of your brain go down to your toe and then back up again. I'm saying that parts of your brain coordinate all different things, not just each other. So this isn't just happening in one area or two areas or three areas of life. This is actually happening in many areas of life. There's lots of truth coming out in our world right now, and it's got nothing to do with the BS aspect of whether or not virology is a pseudoscience or not. Oh, I have to be careful. Can't get censored. Censored. Yeah, that's the thing. Geneticists must abandon their image of a stable genome. The entire industry of genetics must abandon, as in, go, there's nothing that can be saved here, let's go. Not, oh, maybe we could save this, or maybe we could save this. No, just leave it all behind, walk over here, step away from the table, just leave it go. Must abandon their image of stable genome, in which changes are pathological exceptions. The genome of each individual in a state of constant The genome of each individual is in a state of constant transformation. Constant. Not moment to moment, continuously changing. As a result, every organism, every human being, and every cell of the body is a genetic universe unto its own. Now, if you follow my videos, and if you don't, go back and watch them because they're freaking amazing, self-promo, but if you take a look at any one of your bits and pieces, it is an entire universe unto itself. And if you, like I said, have a look at any of my previous videos, you'll hear me tell you in many different ways how you are an extravagantly amazing individual. And it's not because you're Jeffrey McBovine who works at this place and you have a digging family and you've paid off your house, you've got a good credit rating. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, and I don't go into this in my videos very often because I'm trying to figure out how to communicate this in a way that will keep you on track and not let me ramble into sort of a humdrum or a murmuring, a mumble, in a way, kind of like I'm doing a little bit at the moment. But every one of you are a collection of cells. Every one of those cells is an entirely individual entity unto itself, and every one of them is in coordination with each other from the very moment of your beginning of conception. I'm not talking about when your parents had sex, I'm talking about prior to that. Check out you inside of your grandma's womb when she's still inside of your mum. I'm digressing too much here, but the point I'm trying to get to very succinctly before I move on to the last paragraph is quite simply that you are here inside of this universe. Inside of you, your cells are inside of another entire universe. Inside of your cells, you have bits and pieces. They're entirely different universes. Those bits and pieces are made up of atoms. They're entirely different universes. Those atoms are made up of subatomic particles. Those are entirely different universes. Then you get into the quantum mechanics of the Hadron Collider. They're still under a lot of smoke and mirrors at the moment, and a lot of people are very silly about modern research in trying to find and get ahead of their competition. But needless to say, at every point in turn, including our solar system in the galaxy, is unto its own. Our galaxy unto the rest of it is unto its own. And whether or not all the galaxies are flat or not, don't care, not getting into that discussion at the moment. What I'm trying to say is, you're fucking epic. And you just got a whole lot fucking more epic. Excuse the language. I talk Australian. The first analysis of the human genome was still a lengthy but costly affair. The results celebrated in 2000, the year 2000, by US President Bill Clinton as the Book of Life. A sequence of 3 billion letters, since then new laboratory techniques with the help of which enormous amounts of data can be generated and analyzed have generated a flood of new findings on the inner life of the human genome in particular. In the process, the book dissolves before the eyes of the readers. The genome is not a stable text. The state of knowledge also raises basic philosophical questions, such as the genetic and thus biophysical identity of the human being. The state of knowledge also raises basic philosophical questions, such as the genetic and thus biophysical identity of a human being. A human being is the biophysical identity of the human. You're not a human being. You are so much more. You are not an evolved monkey. I mean, whether you are or not, that's a false misnomer anyway, because if we are so much more than a biophysical identity of a human being, then that also applies to all other forms of life. A simple cell, take a simple red blood cell, really basic, really simple, really just don't even bother, it's really boring. All of a sudden becomes as extremely important as every one of you. Mind you, that statement that I just said, that a single red blood cell is pointless, is like saying that you're pointless. Every single one of your blood cells is just as important as each other. Just as we all are. As amazing as each other. The last little bit. The genome is not a stable text and possibly demands radically different answers. Radically different answers. I mean, it's not radically for you, me, and my audience. You know, we're pretty uppity on all this sort of stuff. The geneticists have their sights set on a new human project motto. All about the ego. This is not New Age spiritualism. This is a roundtable discussion, or the results of a roundtable discussion between 25 high-level geneticists. Sorry. Let me rephrase and get the exact quote. 2 years ago, 25 geneticists sat down at the University of California at Berkeley. There you go. All of these are saying we need a radically new idea about what a human being is. Last little bit. After the first genome coding, only a few people suspected this. This is in a paragraph later on in the document. After the first genome coding, only a few people suspected this. The experts believed they had understood how a gene looks and functions, which functional principles the human or microbial genome follows. He goes on to say in quotes, in retrospect, our assumptions about how the genome works back then were so naive that it is almost embarrassing, says Craig Venter, who is involved in the project with his company Celera. Now, I haven't fact-checked this, but if I recall off the top of my mind, Celera was one of the companies involved with the genome process, the decoding of the DNA process back that they're talking about, that ended in the year 2000. That they were so naive that it's embarrassing to them. radically different ideas of what a human being is. That geneticists must abandon their image of a stable genome. The genome was considered to be the unchangeable blueprint of the human being, which is determined at the beginning of our life. Science must bid farewell to this idea. In reality, outside of a textbook or a scientific laboratory experiment, inside of your body, in reality, our genetic makeup is in a state of constant change. Thanks for hanging out. Add in lots of comments and engage, because that's what we're all here for. Otherwise, bye. Like I said, I'll post the link in the subject title or comments wherever I end up posting it, so that way you can have a look at this document here. I'm grabbing a download of it because this document contains 9 pages, some amazing information that if I posted too much of it on my general Facebook wall, I would be removed and flagged as inappropriate, spreading false information, despite the fact that these are the leading geneticists talking about this currently. Oh no, sorry, not currently. This was 2008. Ooh. We've known about this for a while, as it turns out. I keep thinking 2008 was like yesterday. No, that's 14 years ago. Shit. And with that, yes. Thank you, Kara. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Sheree. Thank you, Jackie. Have a wonderful night. Okay, love to you all. Ciao.